If someone told me that love could bloom in the ruins of the dead, I would have laughed in their face. But last night, when I opened my eyes in the dark corridors of St. Mary's Hospital, the same hospital that's been abandoned since the 70s, I wasn't laughing. I was in another man's body, wearing his skin, breathing his grief, and all I could think was, who the hell are you and why do you feel like home? The first time it happened, I thought it was a dream. I went to bed in my own apartment in Chicago, woke up in cracked leather shoes on faded linoleum floors. The hospital smelled of dust and mold, yet everything was too vivid, too sharp to be imagined. I looked down and saw a white coat over my chest, a stethoscope hanging like a noose around my neck. In the dim reflection of a broken mirror, a face stared back at me. A man in his late 20s, dark hair falling into tired eyes, lips pressed into a line that had forgotten how to smile. That was how I met him, or maybe how I became him. And then there was the other boy. The first night, I found him sitting in the ruined waiting area, where the sun slipped through shattered glass. He looked out of place, too alive for the broken scenery. Jeans worn at the knees, a plaid shirt hanging loose, freckles scattered across his nose like constellations. He lifted his head when I entered, eyes so blue they cut right through the dust-filled air. "You're late," he said, as if he'd been waiting forever. I had no idea what to say. Hell, I didn't even know his name. But the strangest part was the way my borrowed body reacted, the way my pulse quickened, the way something deep in my chest pulled toward him, as if he was gravity itself. He smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "You don't remember me, do you?" By the second night, denial wasn't an option. This wasn't a dream, and I wasn't hallucinating. Every night I went to bed in my own life, I woke up in his body. This doctor whose name I still didn't know, walking the empty corridors of a hospital swallowed by vines and silence. And every night he was there. The boy. His name, I would learn, was Aaron. He was younger than the doctor, maybe 22, with a restless energy that didn't fit the stillness of the abandoned building. He told me he used to sneak in here as a kid, daring his friends to explore the dark halls. That's how he found me, or him, or us. I didn't know what to call it. All I knew was that he wasn't afraid. And maybe that's what terrified me the most. "Why do you keep coming back?" I asked him on the third night, as we sat side by side on the steps of the hospital's front entrance. The sky was streaked with red and purple, the kind of sunset that makes you believe in second chances. Aaron shrugged, his shoulder brushing mine. "Because you're here. I'm not even real," I muttered. He turned to me then, and the look in his eyes pinned me to the spot. "You feel real enough to me." The nights stretched on, each one unraveling more of the mystery. I learned the doctor's name from a faded ID badge clipped to his coat. Dr. Daniel Hayes. He had worked at St. Mary's back when it was still alive, still humming with fluorescent lights and the echoes of footsteps. But something had happened. Something that left the hospital to rot and him trapped in its ruins. Sometimes, when the wind howled through broken windows, I felt it. The sorrow lodged in Daniel's bones, the ache of unfinished business. It seeped into me, became mine, until I couldn't tell where his grief ended and my own began. And then there was Aaron, who carried his own kind of sadness. He'd lost people too, though he never told me the full story. Instead, he told me about the stars, about the way he used to lie on the roof of his childhood home and trace shapes in the constellations. He laughed when he talked, but his laughter always ended too quickly, like a song cut off before the final note. One night, he pointed up at the broken hospital sign where the letters had long since fallen away. "When I was little, I thought ghosts lived here," he said. "Now I think maybe it's not the ghosts we should be afraid of. Maybe it's the way the living refuse to let go." I didn't answer because deep down I knew he was talking about me. The connection between us grew with each night. It wasn't sudden, like lightning. It was slow, like the dawn creeping across the horizon. A touch of his hand brushing mine in the hallway. The way his laughter made the silence less suffocating. The way he looked at me, not as a stranger or a ghost, but as someone worth remembering. But every dawn, I woke up back in my own body, and every dawn, the absence of him felt like a wound. One night, after what felt like weeks of haunting the hospital together, I finally asked him, "Aaron, why do you stay? You could walk away. You don't owe me anything." He looked at me, his jaw tightening, his eyes glistening under the pale light of the moon. "Because maybe you're the only thing keeping me from falling apart." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The air was heavy with things unspoken. And then, slowly, as if pulled by an invisible thread, he leaned closer. Our foreheads touched, his breath warm against my lips, the world narrowing down to the inches between us. I wanted to kiss him. God, I wanted to, but I didn't. Because how do you kiss someone when you're not sure if you'll ever exist for them in the daylight? And that was the cruelest part. Every night we grew closer, and every morning I was ripped away. I didn't know if I was meant to solve Daniel's unfinished story, or if I was simply doomed to be a visitor in a life that wasn't mine. But I knew this. The nights with Aaron were real. His laughter was real. The way he looked at me, like I was more than a borrowed body, more than a ghost, was real. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth fighting for. The fourth week of waking up in Daniel Hayes's body left me raw. Every nerve stretched thin between two lives I couldn't reconcile. By day, I stumbled through my own existence in Chicago, drinking too much coffee and pretending I was fine. By night, I wandered ruined hallways with Aaron, chasing ghosts that weren't entirely ghosts, living moments that felt more real than anything sunlight could offer. But the longer it went on, the more I noticed something dangerous. Daniel's body was changing, or maybe it was me changing with him. On the 12th night, when I pressed my hand to a cracked window pane, the reflection staring back at me wasn't Daniel's tired face. It was a strange, fragile blend of us both, a new person, stitched together by grief and longing. I touched my jaw, tracing the blurred line of who I was, and the chill of fear coiled around my spine. Aaron noticed. He always noticed. "You're fading," he said quietly, as we sat on the old gurney that had become our usual meeting place. I forced a smile. "You make it sound like I'm a ghost." His hand brushed mine, just for a second, his thumb grazing my skin. "Maybe you are. Maybe that's why I'm so afraid to blink and lose you." The words landed heavy in my chest, and I couldn't answer. Because what if he was right? The hospital itself began to shift too, as if responding to us. At first, it was little things. An old lamp flickering when we passed, a corridor that seemed shorter one night than the last. But soon it grew undeniable. One evening we found a patient's file on the floor, perfectly clean, as though it had just been written. Another time, the smell of antiseptic filled the air, sharp and sterile, even though the place had been abandoned for decades. Aaron pretended not to be shaken, but I saw the tremor in his hands. "What if we're not supposed to be here?" he whispered once, as we stood in front of the old operating theater. The rusted doors loomed like a mouth ready to swallow us. I swallowed hard. "Or maybe we're the only ones who are." He laughed then, a short, broken sound. "You always know how to make me feel worse." But he didn't let go of my sleeve. He never did. The truth began to bleed out one night when I discovered Daniel's journal. It wasn't where it should have been. How could it exist at all when the hospital had been abandoned for years? But there it was, tucked beneath a stack of rotting blankets in the on-call room. The leather cover warped, but the pages inside startlingly intact. The entries were fragments, written in hurried scrawl. Notes about patients, descriptions of long shifts, and then a slow descent into dread. "They are closing the hospital. Too many unexplained deaths. Too many shadows in the hallways. Someone is watching me when I sleep." And finally, the last entry. I don't think I'll get out. But maybe someone will find me. Maybe someone will remember. The words made my chest ache, a sorrow that wasn't mine sinking claws into my heart. I felt Aaron's eyes on me as I read, his silence louder than anything. "What does it mean?" he asked. I shook my head. "I don't know. But I think Daniel's story isn't finished." Aaron's jaw tightened. "Then maybe that's why you're here." That night, sleep didn't come. Aaron and I sat in the waiting room, surrounded by shadows, and for the first time, I let myself tell him about my life. About the apartment in Chicago, the job I hated, the loneliness that clung to me even in crowded streets. He listened without interrupting, his hand resting near mine on the cracked leather seat. When I finally stopped, he asked, "And yet this feels more real to you than your own life, doesn't it?" The truth burned like confession. "Yes." He leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then maybe you're not borrowing his life. Maybe you're saving it." His eyes caught the faint glow of moonlight, and for a heartbeat, the distance between us disappeared. His lips were inches from mine, warm breath brushing my face. My pulse hammered, and every instinct screamed to close the gap. But the morning always came too fast, and before I could move, the world dissolved into darkness, and I woke up in my own bed with the taste of almost still lingering on my lips. Days became torture. Work felt hollow, conversations meaningless. I carried Aaron's laugh in my chest, Daniel's grief in my bones. I started avoiding my friends, because how do you explain that your heart is trapped in a building no one believes exists? And then came the night that changed everything. When I opened my eyes in Daniel's body, the hospital wasn't silent. It was alive. The lights blazed. Nurses bustled through hallways. The air reeked of bleach and medicine. For the first time, I wasn't wandering ruins. I was standing in the hospital as it once was, decades ago. I staggered, my mind spinning, and Aaron's hand clamped on my arm. But even he looked different, sharper, clearer, like he belonged in this world. "What the hell?" I started. He shook his head, wide-eyed. "Don't talk, just watch." And we did. We watched Daniel Hayes stride down the hall in a crisp white coat, his face unshadowed by grief, his voice strong as he ordered a nurse to prep for surgery. We followed him into a room where a boy lay on a gurney, pale and bleeding. Aaron froze, color draining from his face, his lips parted, his body trembling. I turned to him, my stomach sinking. "What is it?" His eyes never left the boy on the gurney. "That's me." The revelation cracked the world open. I didn't know how it was possible, Aaron, lying on the table decades ago, while Aaron also stood beside me, alive and terrified. But in that moment, I understood. Daniel Hayes had fought to save him. Daniel Hayes had died trying. And somehow, their unfinished story had pulled me into its orbit, dragging me across time to bridge what had been lost. Aaron gripped my hand like a lifeline, his nails digging into my skin. "If he doesn't save me," his voice broke, and I squeezed tighter. "Then maybe we can." But even as I said it, I knew the cruel truth. The past is not something you can rewrite. The night ended with Daniel collapsing in the hallway, his journal slipping from his coat pocket, blood blooming through his shirt. He looked straight at me. Not at Aaron, not at the nurses, but at me. And in his fading eyes, I saw recognition. Then the lights went out, the hospital rotted back into ruin, and silence swallowed us whole. Aaron and I stood in the dark, our hands still locked together. His breath came ragged, tears cutting down his freckled cheeks. "He died for me," he whispered. "And I keep living his nights," I said. The truth pressed heavy between us, too big for either of us to carry alone. And yet, when Aaron leaned into me, resting his forehead against mine, I realized we weren't carrying it alone anymore. That was the night I stopped pretending this was just a haunting. It was a love story. Broken, tragic, unfinished. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to finish it right. The night after Daniel's death replayed before my eyes. I couldn't breathe. The image of him crumpling in that hallway stayed carved into my brain. The way his gaze had found me, as though he knew I was the intruder wearing his skin. For hours after I woke up in my own apartment, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands, wondering if I'd ever stop feeling the warmth of Aaron's grip. By the time I drifted off again, my heart begged for one thing: let me go back. And I did. But the hospital was darker this time, colder. The walls groaned like they remembered too much. And Aaron was waiting in the main lobby, standing in the place where the receptionist's desk once was, his arms folded tight across his chest. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed red. "You saw it too," he said before I could speak. His voice cracked like dry wood. I nodded. "Daniel died trying to save you." Aaron swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. "And I lived. For what? To walk through this grave every night until I rot inside it too." The bitterness in his tone scared me. He wasn't just haunted, he was drowning. I stepped closer, hesitant. "You lived because he chose you. Maybe that means something." His laugh was sharp, humorless. "Or maybe it just means he wasted his life." "No," the word escaped like a knife from my chest. I grabbed his wrist before he could pull away. "Don't you dare say that. He didn't waste it. You're proof of that." His eyes snapped to mine, wide and glassy. For a long second, silence roared between us, filled only by the faint echo of the wind dragging through the hollow corridors. Then, softly, as if the words hurt, he whispered, "Why do you care so much?" "Because I'm falling for you," I thought. "Because every night I leave pieces of myself behind here, and the only reason I can stand it is because you're beside me." But what I said was, because someone has to. The journal became our compass. Every night I returned, Aaron and I pored over its brittle pages, trying to decipher the truth hidden between Daniel's clipped sentences. There were mentions of shadows moving where no one stood, of patients vanishing without records, of screams in the night that no nurse could trace. Aaron read aloud one passage, his voice trembling. "They say the hospital is cursed, but curses are just love stories that ended wrong, aren't they?" He closed the book, and I realized his hands were shaking. What if this isn't about death? What if it's about unfinished love? I stared at him, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Whose love? For a moment I thought he'd say ours. Instead, he looked away, murmuring, "Daniel's." The nights grew heavier, the air thicker. The hospital felt alive with resentment, as if it resented us for digging too deep. Doors slammed without reason. Windows cracked in silence. Once, when Aaron and I walked past the surgery ward, a gurney rolled forward on its own, squealing wheels slicing the stillness. Aaron clutched my sleeve. "It doesn't want us here." But I couldn't stop, because beneath the fear was something else. Daniel's presence, guiding me, urging me closer to a truth that was mine to uncover. And always beside me was Aaron. One night, exhaustion pulled us to the rooftop. The stars stretched wide above us, cruel in their beauty. We lay on the crumbling cement, shoulders brushing, the night air cool against our skin. "When I was a kid," Aaron murmured, staring at the sky, "I used to think the stars were holes in heaven, that people poked them through so the light would leak out and we'd know there was something better up there." I turned my head, watching him, the way the starlight kissed his freckles, the way his lashes fluttered against his cheeks. It hurt to look, but I couldn't look away. "And now?" I asked. "Now," he sighed, his chest rising and falling with a weight that seemed too heavy for him. "Now I think the stars are just reminders of everything we can't touch." I didn't think. I just reached out and laced my fingers through his. His hand was warm, trembling, but he didn't pull away. For the first time, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was holy. But morning always stole him from me. Each day in Chicago felt emptier, my body dragging through routines while my soul clawed to get back to that rooftop, that hospital, that boy. I stopped answering calls, skipped shifts at work, stared at the ceiling until night claimed me again. And yet, some nights even the hospital withheld him. I'd wake in Daniel's body to find the halls deserted, Aaron nowhere in sight. I'd wander through the ruins, calling his name until my throat went raw, but only echoes answered. When I finally found him again, sitting cross-legged in the chapel, head bowed, I demanded, "Where were you?" He didn't look up. His voice was flat, trying to leave. Leave. His shoulders slumped. "If I stop coming back, maybe you'll stop too. Maybe you'll get your life back." Anger flared hot in my chest. "Don't you get it? My life is here now. With you." That made him look up, his eyes wide with shock, his lips parting like he couldn't breathe. "You don't mean that." "I do." My voice cracked, but I didn't care. I stepped forward, cupping his face in my hands, forcing him to see me. "I mean every damn word." For a second, I thought he'd push me away. Instead, he leaned forward and kissed me. It wasn't soft. It wasn't tentative. It was desperate, hungry, like he'd been starving and I was the only thing left in the world to feed him. His lips crashed against mine, trembling, fierce, and I kissed him back with everything I had, with all the nights of silence and longing and almost pouring out of me at once. When we broke apart, breathless, his forehead rested against mine, and he whispered, "I'm so scared." "Me too," I admitted, "but I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." After that, the hospital's cruelty sharpened. It was as if our kiss had awakened something buried in its bones. The walls seemed to pulse with rage. Shadows twisted at the edges of my vision. More than once, doors locked behind us, trapping us in suffocating rooms until we clawed our way out. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Not when Aaron's hand was in mine. Together, we kept chasing Daniel's truth. Together, we pieced it together. The boy on the table was Aaron. Daniel tried to save him, and in failing, Daniel's spirit became bound to this place. Bound to Aaron. And me? I was the bridge. The thought lodged in me like a knife. Maybe I wasn't supposed to save Daniel. Maybe I was supposed to give him what he never got. Closure. But closure always comes with a cost. One night, as Aaron and I sat in the ruined cafeteria, sharing the stale silence, he asked me the question I'd been dreading. "What happens when it ends?" I froze. "What do you mean?" He picked at a crack in the table, not meeting my eyes. "When Daniel's story is done. When you finally set him free. What happens to us?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell him that nothing would change, that I'd still wake up in his world every night, that we'd keep holding each other until the walls of the hospital crumbled for good. But I couldn't. So I said the only thing I could, "I don't know." He looked at me then, eyes wet, jaw tight. "Then promise me one thing. Promise me that, no matter what happens, you won't forget me." My chest cracked open. I reached across the table, gripping his hand. "Aaron, you're unforgettable." That night, I didn't wake in my own bed. I woke still in Daniel's body, still in the hospital, with Aaron asleep beside me, his head on my shoulder. For the first time, the dawn didn't steal me away. And I knew then, the story was changing. The ending hadn't been written yet. The morning that never came left me unmoored. For the first time, I hadn't been pulled back to my own bed in Chicago. I was still in Daniel's body, still in St. Mary's Hospital, with Aaron curled against me on the cracked vinyl bench of the waiting room. His breathing was steady, his hair soft against my shoulder, and for a brief moment, the world felt almost merciful. Almost. Because mercy wasn't what this place was built on. When Aaron stirred awake, confusion clouded his eyes. "You're still here," he whispered, as if afraid that speaking louder would shatter the fragile miracle. "I guess I am." A slow smile broke across his face, but behind it, fear lingered. "That means something's changing." "Yeah." I tightened my grip on Daniel's journal, the leather warm against my palm. "And I don't know if it's good or bad." We spent that day, if you could call it a day, since no sunlight penetrated the ruined windows, wandering the hospital together. It was different, more alive, as though it had dragged itself closer to the world of the living. The air smelled less of dust, more of antiseptic. The peeling paint looked freshly cracked, like the decay itself had reset. The hospital wanted something from us. In the pediatric wing, we found drawings taped to the walls. Stick figures holding hands under a sun, a crooked house with smoke curling from the chimney. Children's art, untouched by time. My throat ached as I traced one picture of a doctor with a big red heart drawn on his chest. Aaron stood behind me, his hand brushing my back. "You think these are memories?" I nodded. "Not ours. The hospital's." He shivered, and I wished I could shield him from it all. But the truth was, he was as tangled in this story as I was. That night, or whatever passed for night, I dreamed inside the dream. I stood in the operating theater again, watching Daniel's final moments. He leaned over Aaron's bleeding body, barking orders, his hands steady even as blood stained his coat. And then the lights flickered, machines failed, and shadows thickened in the corners of the room. It wasn't just tragedy, it was sabotage. When Daniel collapsed, I caught a glimpse of something. Someone, in the shadows. A figure with hollow eyes and a mouth twisted in something like a smile. The air froze around me, colder than death. And then I woke gasping, Aaron shaking me by the shoulders. "What did you see?" he demanded. I swallowed hard. It wasn't just an accident. Someone wanted him to fail. His face drained of color. "Why?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I think the hospital does." We didn't have long to wonder. The next time we opened the journal, new words had appeared, written in fresh ink that smelled of iron. "They want the boy. If I can't save him, they'll take him. If you find this, protect him." The letters bled across the page, and Aaron recoiled, his hand gripping mine so tight it hurt. "It's talking to us." "No," my voice shook. "He's talking to us. Daniel." And suddenly it all made sense. Daniel wasn't trapped here because he failed. He was trapped because he refused to let go. He had tethered himself to this place to protect Aaron, to fight whatever darkness had claimed the hospital. And now, by some cruel twist, I was part of that fight. The hospital grew hostile. Hallways stretched impossibly long. Stairs ended in brick walls. Once, when we tried to leave through the main entrance, the doors slammed shut so hard the glass rattled for minutes afterward. Aaron pressed his forehead to the cold wood, his voice cracking. "It won't let us out." I pulled him back, holding him against my chest. "Then we'll make it let us." But I didn't know how. Every night, the shadows grew bolder. They whispered through the vents, their voices like children crying. They brushed against my skin, icy and sharp, leaving marks that didn't fade when I woke in my own body. Aaron saw them too, and every time he flinched, I wrapped an arm around him, grounding us both. One night, as we hid in the chapel from the crawling dark, Aaron's walls cracked. He sat on the altar steps, his knees drawn to his chest, his voice breaking. "I don't want to lose you," he confessed. "Not you, not again. Every time I close my eyes, I think about that boy on the table. about how close I came. And now I feel like it's happening all over again. I knelt beside him, cupping his face, forcing him to see me through his tears. Aaron, listen to me. You're not alone this time. I'm not Daniel. I can't promise I won't fail, but I can promise I won't stop fighting. Not for you. His eyes searched mine, desperate, aching. And then he kissed me again. Softer this time, but with all the weight of a boy who'd been waiting his whole life for someone to stay. When we pulled apart, I rested my forehead against his. You're the reason I'm here. Don't ever forget that. The journal gave us one last clue. Find the heart of the hospital. First, it sounded like metaphor, but then I remembered the basement, a place I hadn't dared to go. The morgue, the foundation of every hospital, where silence weighed heavier than life itself. Aaron's hand shook in mine as we descended the stairs. The air grew colder, thicker, each step echoing like a drumbeat. By the time we reached the double doors, my breath frosted in the air. This is it, I whispered. Aaron squeezed my hand. Then let's finish it. We pushed the doors open. Inside, the morgue wasn't a room. It was a void. The walls stretched endlessly into darkness, lined with doors that groaned and rattled, as if something inside longed to escape. In the center stood an operating table, pristine and gleaming, out of place in the decay. And on it lay Daniel. His chest rose and fell faintly, his face pale, his hands folded over his stomach. He looked both alive and dead, suspended between worlds. Aaron gasped, his nails digging into my arm. It's him. As we stepped closer, Daniel's eyes snapped open. But they weren't his eyes. They were hollow, black, filled with the same void that had consumed the hospital. His mouth twisted into a smile I'd seen before, in the shadows of my dream. The hospital wasn't just haunted. It was alive, and it had been feeding on him all along. Aaron stumbled back, horror flooding his face. That's not him. The thing in Daniel's body sat up slowly, tilting its head, studying us like prey. Its voice was both Daniel's and something darker, layered and endless. You don't belong here, it hissed. But you've brought me what I wanted. Its gaze locked on Aaron, and my blood turned to ice. I moved in front of him instinctively, fists clenched, voice shaking but firm. You're not taking him. The smile widened. He was always mine. Daniel gave him to me the night he failed. Aaron's breath hitched behind me. That's a lie. But was it? The doubt crept in, sharp and merciless. Had Daniel really saved him, or had he bargained his soul to keep him alive? The truth pressed heavy on my chest, but I didn't have time to unravel it, because the hospital surged around us, shadows tearing free of the walls, swirling toward us like a storm. And I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that this was the climax Daniel had been waiting for. The heart of the hospital wasn't just a place. It was a choice. And soon one of us would have to make it. The storm of shadows surged around us, a whirlwind of voices and screams. I stood in front of Aaron, my fists balled, my heart hammering. The thing that wore Daniel's face smiled at me, all teeth and hunger. You think you can stop me? It whispered, its voice echoing from every wall. You're just a dream in a borrowed body. Maybe it was right. Maybe I was nothing. But Aaron's hand clutched the back of my shirt, trembling but steady. That small touch grounded me in a way nothing else could. I don't care what I am, I said. I won't let you have him. The creature tilted its head, amused. Then die with him. The shadows lunged. I dragged Aaron behind the operating table, ducking as black tendrils whipped past, cutting deep gouges into the tile. My mind screamed for a plan, any plan, but all I had was instinct. I shoved the journal into Aaron's hands. Read it, I ordered. There has to be something left. His wide eyes locked on mine. What if there isn't? Then make something, I said. You're the reason Daniel fought. You're the reason I'm here. Don't stop now. Tears shimmered in his eyes, but he nodded and flipped the book open. Pages fluttered like wings, words scrawling themselves faster than he could turn them. I held the shadows at bay, swinging a broken metal rod like a weapon, even though I knew I couldn't touch them. Still, every second counted. Then the pages stilled. Aaron's voice cracked as he read aloud. To free me, one must give back what was taken. A heart for a heart. A life for a life. My blood ran cold. No. Aaron shook his head, his jaw trembling. It means me. I should have died that night. He traded himself for me. The hospital only exists because I'm still breathing. That's not your fault, I shouted over the howling wind. You don't owe it anything. But his gaze was steady now, filled with a kind of terrible peace. If it means saving you, saving him, then maybe I do. He started forward. I grabbed his arm, yanking him back. No, Aaron, listen to me. Daniel didn't die so you could throw yourself away. He wanted you to live. Really live. If you give yourself up now, then everything he did was for nothing. The shadow wearing Daniel's face sneered. Pretty words. But the boy knows the truth. Deep down, he knows he should have died. Aaron wavered, his breathing ragged. The darkness pressed closer, feeding on his doubt. I did the only thing I could. I kissed him. Not soft this time. Desperate. Fierce. The kind of kiss that said, I need you. I can't do this without you. You are the only thing tethering me to this nightmare. When I pulled back, my forehead pressed to his, I whispered, live for me. If not for yourself, then for me. The shadows shrieked, recoiling as though burned. The figure on the table convulsed, its smile twisting into rage. No, no, he belongs to me. Daniel's body arched, his eyes flashing. Not black now, but clear, human, filled with pain. His voice broke through, raw and desperate. Take me instead, the creature screamed, fighting him. But Daniel pushed up from the table, staggering forward. His face was pale, drenched in sweat, but his gaze locked on Aaron with unshakable love. I kept you safe once, he whispered. Let me do it again. Aaron's knees buckled. Daniel! But before he could finish, Daniel thrust the journal into my chest. End it. Now! The final page blazed with words. Burn the heart. Burn the memory. Free the soul. I understood. The heart of the hospital wasn't Aaron. It was Daniel. His sacrifice had bound this place, and only destroying the tether could release him. I looked at him, my throat tight. Are you sure? His smile was tired, gentle. You'll take care of him. That's all I need. Aaron sobbed, reaching for him, but I held him back. If you go. Daniel cupped Aaron's cheek, his hand trembling but warm. Then I'll finally rest, and you'll finally live. The shadows screamed, desperate now, lashing out in every direction. But I struck a match. God knows where it came from, maybe the hospital itself gave it to me, and dropped it onto the journal. Flames roared to life, golden and hungry. The fire spread instantly, devouring the journal, then leaping to the walls, the ceiling, the endless rows of morgue drawers. The shadows writhed and howled as the light consumed them, their screams shaking the very ground. Daniel stood tall, his coat whipping in the heat, his eyes clear and human once more. He looked at Aaron one last time. I love you, he said simply. Then the fire swallowed him whole. The hospital collapsed. Walls buckled, windows shattered. The void cracked open like glass, splintering into 1,000 shards of light. Aaron clung to me, burying his face in my chest as the world dissolved around us. And then, silence. I woke in my own bed in Chicago. My body, my apartment, morning sunlight streaming through the blinds. For the first time in weeks, I was me. But the weight of what I'd left behind pressed down hard. Daniel was gone. The hospital was gone. And Aaron, a knock at my door shattered the thought. I stumbled to my feet, heart in my throat, and yanked it open. Aaron stood there. He looked different, healthier, alive in a way I'd never seen in that broken, haunted place. His plaid shirt was clean, his eyes bright, though rimmed with exhaustion. For a moment, we just stared at each other, disbelief crashing between us. Then he whispered, "It wasn't a dream." I pulled him into my arms before either of us could say another word. We held each other for a long time, shaking, crying, laughing through the tears. Finally, he drew back just enough to meet my eyes. "He's gone, isn't he?" I nodded. "Yeah, but he wanted this. He wanted you to live." Aaron swallowed hard, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Then we have to. For him." I brushed his hair back gently. Together. That night, we lay tangled in each other's arms. The city alive outside my window. The weight of grief lingered, sharp and real, but so did something else. Hope. Daniel had given us a gift, one neither of us could ever repay. He'd given us a chance. And as I drifted into sleep, Aaron's breath steady against my skin, I whispered a promise into the darkness. "I'll keep him safe, Daniel. I swear it." When I dreamed again, there was no hospital. Just a quiet meadow, sunlight spilling over wildflowers. Daniel stood at the edge, his white coat gone, his face calm. He raised a hand in farewell. And then he walked into the light. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.